government is government and politics is politics. And, you know, public education has not been what it should be for our students and for families for a long time. But it's like we got the absolute worst administration the second time. And we still like have not gotten it together. So it feels like this convergence and this perfect storm of just like not good things. And that part is disappointing because it's like, man, like we've had a lot of time now. And that was before I even got here.
Yeah,
so,
I know. I was laughing with a friend. We were both like, we're like single, like single gay guys. We don't have kids, but it's like our friends, like we're losing friends. When they have kids, they have to make this choice and they move out of town,
You do have to make a choice.
It's like, from a personal standpoint on every level, I want us to do better on this.
Yeah. I think about that a lot, about the personal choices, peace, and like I cannot sacrifice my daughter's life and her future.
And you shouldn't be faced with that choice.
I want to be, Ella Baker.
Yeah.
That's not, she didn't sign up for me to be her mom. You know what I mean? So like at what point do I?
Yeah. Well, and personally, I mean, I was born in Columbus and then my parents made that choice.
Yeah.
And moved to Bexley.
Yeah.
And I feel sad by that, being faced with that. And I'm back here and I'm like, I like it here. Like we got to build it up here and support each other here.
Yeah. But you have to make that calculation.
Yeah, I know. And I'm in a privileged position not to, I don't have kids, so I don't have to make that choice right now.
Right. But like, it's like if you wanted to,
exactly.
Then, you have to start thinking about those things.
Exactly.
So you grew up in Bexley then. Okay. So your parents lived in Columbus first. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where in Columbus?
Well, in German Village, just at the top of 4th and Livingston.
Okay.
Yeah,
what was
in a
German
little
Village
townhouse.
like back in the day? Is it similar to like what it is now?
I think it's a lot different.
Okay.
There was not so many.
No offense, parents. I said back in the day like it was like 1940. That's not what I meant. Your parents are watching. I meant back in the day, like when we were, before we were born.
It was different. I think. I think not so many. I mean, not so much wealth, right?
Yeah,
not so much investment in those houses and making them so expensive, right?
Yeah, right.
I was just talking to somebody, a mom of a friend of mine, who was talking about remembering trying to get the playground into Schiller Park and like the advocacy to get a playground there for the kids.
Really?
Yeah, and how that was a whole project,
Yeah.
So it's changed a lot.
I love hearing those stories.
Yeah, me too.
Of how things got to be, where they are and what they are.
Yeah.
So that's a really awesome story because I'm definitely familiar with that area. We lived out, not in German Village, but in that area for like in our first, iterations of being like young people. Because my husband's from Columbus.
Oh, cool.
So yeah.
Nice.
So before we get too far into the conversation, I want to tell everybody who I'm talking to. I'm talking to Jesse Vogel, who's running for City Council for District 7. So thank you for coming up and chatting with us, Jesse.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Tria.
Of course. And this is like, not too awkward because I hosted the candidate forum. So it's not like coming up here with just a complete stranger, which can be like, you don't know what folks' vibes are. So we have a little bit of a rapport.
Yeah.
You've done some work in the past with some other folks in the city that I'm like pretty familiar with. So
great.
I'm really excited to have you on and to have everyone on. I think that it's important to have longer conversations with people.
Yeah.
So,
and I'm thankful for what you all do because I know, it's one thing that's interesting. I've never run for office before, but in this work, you see how important like media is in covering what's going on in Columbus and to help and tell stories. And so, I appreciate what you do serving that role in the city. Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So what made you decide you said you never ran for office before. I would never. I think it takes like, a lot of calculations, right? Like, because you have to think about all the things that are going to happen when you decide to run for office, like loss of privacy and just like constant scrutiny and like all of these things. And so I really appreciate people that, especially in this day and age, that make the decision to decide, like, I care so much about this and I think that I could do a good job. And so I'm going to like throw my hat in the ring. So at what point was it that you were like, all right, never run for office before, I'm about to do it? Like, what was the catalyst for that? Or is it something that you've always wanted to do?
Yeah. Well, I've thought about it on and off in different ways. When I was a kid, and as a college student, I got involved in campaigns, helping knock on doors, and liked that in a way that I think not everyone does. Talking to strangers about what we can do in our community with one another to make things different, to make things better. So I was always curious about that. And then, I had the opportunity to come back and go to law school at Ohio State, and did this work around housing issues and started representing people on eviction defense and helping try to get repairs made when their ceiling caves in, and, bad things going on with landlords taking advantage of people. And one experience, I've been trying to meditate on a little bit was working with this community of folks who lived up on the north side. Like, you go up Westerville Road and then it's about 10 minutes east of Easton. And they had lived in these units, these apartments for 10, 15, 20 years that had been affordable for them. And there was one guy in particular who's an older African-American guy named Al, who was all fired up because they had gotten notices after having built their lives there that they were going to have to move out in 60 days.
Knew where that was going.
Yeah. And I thought, I sat on his front stoop looking out onto the parking lot, and, I got there and he had set up a table and he was frying fish and he was inviting his neighbors over, and he was like, let's talk to this lawyer. Let's talk about what we can do.
Yeah.
And people gathered around and it just kept happening. These people showing up and, I'm touched by that kind of hospitality and community, and saw him knowing everyone and everything going on and what they needed and being concerned about them.
And like offering to share like the resource of you.
Yeah. Yeah. And it made me want to think about how can we do better for people and help. We're losing these communities. We're at risk of that.
Yeah.
And we are doing that. And so, it was interesting. He had called city council, went down and testified, and kept thinking, isn't there something council can do? Isn't there something we can do? And I thought, we have to work to do better for people like him.
Yeah. So what you're saying is that he had pulled all the levers that he knew to pull. Like, he called city council, he went down there, he spoke to people, and he did not feel like he got what he needed.
That's right.
Yeah, that's hard, right? Because a lot of the conversations always centers on like people not knowing, or people like not being engaged, or people like not showing up, voter turnout and all that stuff. What we don't always talk about is when people do know how to navigate a system, or at least, a little bit, and they try to do it. And because I had a similar conversation with somebody this week, a woman an immigrant woman, who opened a store, and she wanted to offer, certain services at her store. And she said, well, do you know anyone that works in government? I said, oh, I know a few people. And she said, well, I filled out my application and I did it back months ago and I just haven't heard anything. And, she's got several like marginalized identities, one being an immigrant, one being an African person. And I just thought to myself, like, man, like, people really do their best to like navigate systems. And then when they are navigating them, they get like, there's like a backstop or it gets slow or there's like all this bureaucracy. And it was just a weird moment because she asked me, do you know anybody? And I said, yeah, I know some people that I can. But it's like, if I didn't, then she'd kind of still be out trying to figure it out. Like I was able to make a connection for her.
Yeah.
But it's like, it really shouldn't be that hard.
Yeah.
You know?
It shouldn't. And, I guess sometimes, I think one thing I think about my background and experience, I've worked as a lawyer representing people in eviction court, for example, which is very, a quick process. It takes just a few weeks to get someone evicted. And sometimes you meet your client like that day and you have to figure something out about, is there a problem I can solve for you? How can I do this? And you really have to know how everything works because there's so many little ways in which the application for rental assistance might get lost or might not go through, and you have to track all these details down. And so I have some experience trying to do that for people. And I think sometimes in government or in elected office or in these bureaucracies, sometimes the person sitting at the front assumes it's going to work or thinks they fixed it by giving them a resource. Right. But if they didn't make the connection, it didn't fix it.
It just goes down a hole of just like more convoluted stuff that's hard to understand. And I think that it's great that you have helped people navigate complex systems because you have to kind of understand how complex it is. Because when people come in with the rosy attitude, like, yeah, I'm going to run for office, it's like, okay, like, I hope you know what you're signing up for.
Yeah.
And how hard it is to unravel certain things that have been that way for a long time. But before we go too far down this rabbit hole, one of the good things about this show is like I liked for people to hear about you. Like I want people to hear about like your life in Columbus. You're from Bexley, so talk a little bit about just your background so that the people can feel like they know you a little bit.
Sure. Well, yeah, like I said, I was born in Columbus and then in German Village up on 4th in Livingston.
Okay.
And then my folks ended up moving when we started elementary school to Bexley. And, I grew up being interested in Columbus and coming into the city, my dad is actually from New York.
Okay.
My mom's from Wisconsin, so different places.
Okay. How'd they get here?
They got here for work.
Okay.
Yeah, my dad was a college professor.
Oh, okay.
Out at Denison, actually.
Oh, yeah. I love that area. It's so beautiful.
Yeah, so a bit of a commute, but he's somebody who likes, he's from New York, so he wanted to be close to the city. He wanted to be in the city.
Yeah.
And I kind of did too. I mean,
I had an internship in New York after college.
Oh, yeah.
I've never told this story on this show. And my husband is from here. And he was like, well, I want you to come back to Columbus. And I was like, no. And he was like, and I just went through all these things that made it hard to like navigate New York City. So I was like, if I come back there, we cannot live in the suburbs.
Yeah.
And he was like, okay, I promise we will never live in the suburbs. And we have never lived in the suburbs. So I understand your dad completely.
Yeah. And I feel like that.
No shade to the suburbs. I knew that I wanted I've liked that kind of life. And like, I wanted to be around like noise sometimes and art and lots of different people. And like, I love a strip mall just as much as the next person. But I did not want that. I wanted to have to drive a little bit to get to the strip mall. So I understand your dad
totally. And you think my parents tried to like embrace the city a little bit and as best they could, as parents I have a twin sister, so there was a lot going on in the house.
That's so cute.
Yeah. So we would come in and do stuff, and I love Cosi and the original Wendy's across the street. And I actually remember in middle school, I did a project about Columbus and like photographs of Columbus. So I drove around the city and took pictures of like some of the old buildings. And I think that was a moment for me as a kid to be like, oh, this is an interesting place with a whole history that I'm interested in and want to dig into. And so then, you know, I had been away and I lived in DC a few years and then came back here to go to law school. You know, I had the opportunity to get a scholarship to be able to go to Ohio State. And I knew that I wanted to work for people rather than big companies. And
I was going to ask you didn't want the big corporate check?
No, I didn't.
You
know, I wanted to do that kind of work. And so I
get it.
I thought, oh, okay, I got this scholarship. Ohio State's great. And also I'm excited about being back in Columbus. And so have been glad to be able to build my work and life here in the city over the past 6 years or whatever.
Awesome. And is your family still here? Like you still have support and are they excited about your
they're
city
pumped.
council?
They're excited.
That's
my
awesome.
sister's like a super volunteer. Like she was out knocking doors with us this weekend.
She's got to be like
I know
your biggest fan.
My mom was helping us look at the signatures, make sure we're on track.
Nice.
So it's cool.
Are they surprised about this, or are they like, oh, we always knew you were gonna
I think they're kind of like that's right, go for it.
Okay. Awesome.
They might think, I mean, a little bit nervousness, like, what are you doing? Is this going to work? But they're excited about it.
For sure.
And we were out, you know, this weekend knocking doors and it's fun to engage them in that. I just got to tell you, you know, because I'm pumped about it, is that this past weekend, our first 2 days of getting out and canvassing to tell people about this election that people, you know, might not know about because it's a primary and it's an off year. And we had 30 volunteers come help us and we knocked 1,200 doors in 2 days.
It seems like people are really excited about your candidacy, that you've raised more money than everybody else. Sounds like you have like a pretty solid volunteer base.
It's exciting.
You know, why do you think people are so, besides your mom and dad and your sister, okay, so they got to be out there. But like, where are all these other people coming from? Why do you think they're so like excited to support you?
Well, I think back to, I mean, this work that I did in 2020, 2021 while I was a law student.
Because you co-founded an organization.
That's right.
Right. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I mean, we started this organization that we called the Central Ohio Housing Action Network. And, you know, think back to that moment, pandemic, lockdown, a lot of nervousness, isolation, and people had lost income, trying to figure out how to navigate unemployment. And some of us got together and said, we watched how the eviction court had reopened. This is another thing about government, right? Like there was quote unquote a federal eviction moratorium,
right?
But to take advantage of it, you had to like go to court and sign an affidavit. So not quite what a normal person would call a stop on eviction.
Right, absolutely. You still are on record now and having to sign paperwork and
exactly
the bureaucracy again, which can be scary because like I'm signing something. So what, you know what I mean?
And confusing. And so we said, let's create this project where we do direct outreach to people with eviction hearings coming up. You know, the court has lists of who has a hearing coming up and their addresses. And so we pulled those lists and we created this little pamphlet about your rights as a tenant and how it worked, how court worked, where to go. Because it had been at the county court downtown, but then for social distancing, they moved it to the convention center. And so people were a little confused by that.
Right.
So we would sort of drive around each weekend and pass out these pamphlets to people's doors with some hand sanitizer and masks and stuff. And I think back then, I was amazed by how many people wanted to help with that. And we were coordinating hundreds of volunteers each week to do that work because they saw people in need in this city and they wanted to help. And now I think about this moment and where we're in now, and
kind of come full circle.
And we're re-engaging with those people. And I think people also feel like this is a scary moment. It's a different moment, but also a scary one. And they want something to feel hopeful about that's different.
Yeah.
And they feel like maybe how things are going right now in the city and then with current politics or politicians, isn't quite exciting them in the way. So there's an opportunity to do something different.
Yeah.
So it's very hopeful. I mean, it's like such a dark time, but a lot of people coming out and they want to talk to one another, and we're helping them do that.
Yeah, I think people are more willing now to like work together and, coalition build and all, and, do all the things.
I think we're still in an early moment.
Oh, yeah. We're still in an early moment.
We're
but
trying
I'm
to figure it out. Yeah.
Something's happening.
Yeah.
So it sounds like in 2020, like you were just like, I got to do something.
Mm-hmm.
And where am I going to plug in and like use my expertise and really do something meaningful?
Mm-hmm.
And it also sounds like you filled a gap of something that wasn't already happening.
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen any of that work like continue in terms of like, has the city picked up some of like the tactics that you all utilize in terms of like reaching out to folks? And have you seen any of that happen? Or if you were elected, would you try to implement some of the things that you started with your organization, with the organization that you co-founded, to see that sort of embedded in the process?
That's an interesting question. I think, I don't know. I mean, I think there's been, it's interesting. I think about everything that we do, like all these actions we take with others have ripple effects, and you don't know exactly what they are or where they go. But some of the people that I met in that time are now doing other kinds of advocacy in the city.
Yeah.
That's being impactful.
Right.
There are a lot of people who were involved in that who are also involved today in sort of transit advocacy. And I see the work that was done last year to pass this Link Us ballot initiative. And I think that was engaging people in a different kind of way.
Yeah. So you see the reverberations.
But I also think there's more we can do.
Oh, yeah.
And
sure.
I mean, I think the sort of like, I'm energized by that engagement with people and, our door knocking and getting people into this work.
You seem like an extrovert.
I think I kind of am.
Yeah.
Although,
I'm an extroverted introvert.
Yeah.
Like I need my time, but I do like people and I like talking to people.
Yeah.
And I get those same kind of like, it's kind of like vibes from you too.
I need my time as well.
Yeah, for sure. So let's continue to talk a little bit about housing.
Okay.
One of my concerns is, and a concern I hear from a lot of people in the community, is just like gentrification and displacement of people. So we have like the affordable housing conversation, which then trickles down to just like these more, I don't want to call them boxes, but like issue areas for people. In your work on council, how would you like work to ensure that people can like stay in their neighborhoods?
Well, I think about the story I just told about my friend Al and his neighborhood, his community, and what might be different if we could do anything, if we could get done what's needed. And, I think about how these folks had lived in these units for 20 years and then one day get a notice on the door that says, "Dear Val, you're resident of XXY."
Valued.
Yeah, right. please leave in 60 days. Signed LLC, New Jersey based.
Yeah.
Which for some reason, I love people in New Jersey, but
just rubs you the wrong way.
Yeah, you always
you have no idea what's going on.
Yeah, these other cities, these other places. And I think, well, what if instead of that happening, somebody like Al got a notice on his door from the city of Columbus that said, "Dear resident of Columbus, we want to let you know that your building is being put up for sale. And you have the right to engage in a process to try to buy the building yourself with your neighbors." And you can visit the Columbus Office of Housing and Tenant Protections to get information about how to access some financing so that you can buy it and turn it into a tenant-owned co-op. I think that's a vision that we could try to get to as a city.
Yeah.
That puts a pause on the sort of coming in of outside capital.
Yeah.
And just pauses it and gives our local residents a chance to think about and try to organize around a different future.
Gives people the opportunity to stay in place.
Yeah.
Sometimes to age in place.
Yeah.
To invest in their communities.
And respects their needs.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's like, I think about what would it look like if we built a housing policy that's centered on people and their needs rather than, developers and theirs.
Right. Yeah. Because it's just the centering of just straight up capitalism and not the people, and not the preservation of like place. Right. People like to say a lot of times, so Columbus doesn't have an identity. I hear that all the time. Like there's no, and I don't necessarily think that's true. But I also don't think like selling off the city to developers helps any of it. Helps Columbus really develop that sense of like place and identity that I think a lot of other cities have.
Yeah. And look, I mean, I hear it when folks in office today and in our leadership talk about the need to partner with developers to build what's needed. I get it. They're building, and that's important. But I think that, I take my role as an advocate into this role in city council is what I'd like to do and say, people have different interests and needs, and we have to partner and cooperate sometimes, but we also have to hold true to a value, which is that, we need to build the city for its people, right?
So kind of going in and saying like, what are our shared values? Because that's another thing that I always wonder about when I have people up here who are running for council or running for any sort of elected office. Is just like, how do you plan to work with the people who are already there? Like, because I think it's, as much as sometimes you don't want to, it's necessary in order to get things done.
Totally.
So, and I heard you say a little bit about that just now, but like, what's your philosophy on like how you plan to hold true to like the things that you feel like need to happen and your values, and also work with people who may have a different philosophy on how this work should be done than you? Yeah.
Well, I think what I'd like to do is build on what we're doing right now in this campaign, which is showing up positive, talking about a vision for the future, and bringing a lot of people along with us.
Yeah.
I've sat down with our council members, different ones of them, members and others in elected office in Columbus, and had a lot of great conversations where I think there's a lot we agree on. I think.
What do you disagree on?
Well, I think that we sometimes have different approaches.
Yeah.
And one thing is, I've been committed through this by like running a strong campaign that really engages and tries to excite people. And that's a little different in Columbus in the history of these council races. Yeah. We haven't had a contested primary in some time. And
I bring this up every show.
Yeah.
Because I hear it.
Yeah.
Constantly.
Yeah. And people want a choice.
Yeah. People,
right?
I think people want a choice. And I think that people are like, have been saying it for a long time. And there's been a couple outsized voices talking about this for a long time. And I think like people are asking, and they're asking nicely. And I think now people are just starting to get really, you know what I mean? Like, not salty is not the right word. I think salty was like a while ago. I think now it's like anger, because I think that it's, again, like we were talking about at the beginning of the show, it's like this perfect storm of like feeling like there is an unelected person at the highest levels of our government that I'm upset about. And then when I decide I want to like engage locally, I feel like, how come we don't have competitive races? And I continuously hear that as a, make sure you ask that question. You know what I mean? Make sure that you address that. And so I talk about it like literally all the time.
I mean, and I think that's what we're trying to do here. You know, that's why I'm focused on building a strong team of volunteers to get out and knock doors. That's why I'm focused on raising money, because I know we live in the world we live in, where unfortunately the money is needed to be able to communicate with voters in the way we need to across the city. And, you know, I know that that's maybe surprising to some people who haven't built their political lives in the same kind of way. And, you know, they may feel, I don't know, surprised or something by that, or uncomfortable at times by that. But I keep, you know, saying to everyone I meet, look, I think we have a lot of work we can do together, and we're going to agree on, and goals we can set. And, you know, we may have different approaches to get there, but that's okay. That's part of what it is to live in this growing city that's diverse, that's full of energy. You know, this is a good thing. And, you know, some people
competition is not bad. You know, it's not. And
I'll tell you, I mean, I think that we may have different approaches on some policy issues, but there's so much good, I think, that council members are trying to do. And, you know, today I rode my electric bike down here that is this subsidy program that Councilmember Barroso de Padilla and Council President Hardin collaborated on. It's a great thing. It's like this universal program to get people access to safer biking, safer mobility. And, you know, it's like there's a lot we can work on like that together.
To add and expand on.
Totally.
On the good things.
We just may be taking different paths along the way, but that's okay.
For sure. So I want to ask you about transportation, because I know that's one of your issue areas. Talk about your vision for, you know, Lincus was passed. How would you expand upon that work? Like, what do you think that Columbus is missing right now that it really needs in order to build upon the fact that we're going to have a lot more people here, which means a lot more traffic, which means a lot more different things, like right when it comes to transportation. So talk a little bit about your vision for that.
Well, I mean, I think, as I just said, I think we have a lot of good things going for us right now, and we're like on the right track. I'm glad that we passed that investment in bus rapid transit and increased service and increased reliability, and it's going to help us build more sidewalks and bike lanes. I think I'll take into this role a focus on how is this working for people in the neighborhoods they live. You know, and I live over in Old Town East, and there's a First English Lutheran Church down the street, which is a warming center, has been a warming center funded by CSB, Community Shelter Board. And, you know, so I see people out who are looking for help and needing help. And, you know, sometimes they'll say, hey, can I have a couple bucks to get on the bus to get where I need to go? I know that in Columbus, 1 in 10 don't have access to a car, right? And transportation is the second highest cost in a person's life, family's life on average, besides housing. So as folks focused on how do we make the city livable, affordable, you know, one thing I'd like to see us get to is transit that's free for all, that you can just walk onto, reduces barriers of access, increases ridership. I also want to work with...
Which would increase quality of life.
Which would increase quality of life, which we can do, right? We have a choice we can make to increase quality of life. And we got to make, you know, there's a lot to do to get there, of course, right? Like to do that transition, to think about the money, think about the cost, to think about, importantly, the experience of bus operators who are part of TWU Local 208. Talking, working with them is really important on this. Make sure folks we're addressing whatever concerns our drivers that are the backbone.
I saw you mention unions.
Yeah.
And your as it like having strong unions.
Yeah, of course.
As a person who's part of a union, parents, both my parents were union stewards.
Yeah.
I've been pretty involved
in
union. And I don't know the union. My bonus dad was part of RTA's union for a long time, which I don't know the exact name of it. And then my mom worked at a factory for my entire life, and she was a union steward. So, you know, the advocate for all the folks.
That's awesome.
She always says she saved a lot of people's jobs, and she is literally the reason why I just was born into this idea that, like, you know, you serve others.
Yes.
And so I love that you mentioned, you know, the strong unions piece.
Yeah.
Because I see people talking about it, but not as much, not as much on their platforms. Yeah. So I would love for you to talk about that a little bit too, like just to expand on what you were just saying.
Yeah. I mean, it's been an interesting thing going about this work in this campaign, because, you know, we're talking to each other on this show, and I'm at these forums, and you can say things, but I always want to make sure I'm going back and thinking, well, what does this do to the worker?
Right.
Who's responsible for making this happen, right? So I've been trying to sit down with different locals, different unions in town to build relationship, get to know them.
Yeah.
And, you know, part of that goes back to my experience, like, you know, in college, I was in college when the attack on collective bargaining from the Kasich administration came down, which was SB 5, which was trying to strip public sector employees of their collective bargaining rights. And I organized students to come down in busloads to the State House around the corner and protest that.
So you've been organizing since college, basically.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was employed by AFSCME then.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I've always thought about, we need, you know, in order to make change, you need to build and support bases of people willing to stand up for the right thing.
A regular working
And
people.
Who's doing that right now? Labor. Like, those are the people last weekend who were fighting privatization of the postal service, right? Which we have to fight today. Much less, they also need a contract they've been working without a contract for a few years.
Yeah.
So it's like, those are the people who are organizing our communities, some of them at least. And so when thinking about supporting unions, it's like, that's because we're dependent on unions for getting us better working conditions, yes, and also all sorts of things that we need for a quality of life.
Fighting for better wages, which then, you know, across the board.
Exactly.
Doesn't just affect the, you know, the organization you're in or the company that you're in, but like, you know, it's been really disheartening to see the dismantling of a lot of the federal workforce, and knowing that that's going to trickle down. Being an African American, it's like a lot of the formation of the Black middle class had union jobs, right? So to see that happening has been really scary.
Yeah.
So I appreciate, you know, your acknowledgement of how important it is to not just like make decisions in a vacuum, but like to actually sit down and talk to the people that it's going to affect.
Yeah.
And like go through the layers of what that means to build an agenda that isn't just centered on, you know, one group's area of interest, but like, how do we really mobilize working people? So
yeah, we have to.
That.
Yeah. I mean, I think we have to find a way forward, and we have to work together to do that. And I truly have enjoyed and been honored by the conversations I've gotten to have by showing up for labor in different ways. About what their needs are, and
it's
hope
intense.
to be a strong advocate.
It's intense. Like when you sit at the bargaining table for different things, like, wow, like you really don't get a good sense of it until you're actually like in it and see how much like people care, you know? So I appreciate that being a part of your platform. And I also wanted to mention that, I saw that you mentioned kids
Yeah.
in your platform. And people talk about families and all of that. Like, that's not something that's like new. But I love that you specifically called out kids in your agenda and making sure that we have strong pre-K, childcare, and restorative practices to unlearn trauma. As a parent, I'm always like, do I want to expand my family? Well, it costs a lot to do that. And what does support, look like? Like what kind of supports are going to be out there for, somebody like me who's pretty well resourced even thinks about that to tap into. So for the folks who are not, like, I think it's a really needed thing to have conversation around, which not to say that it's not happening at all. I mean, there are several places in the city where folks are focusing on that, but I want to hear from you as a person who's running for council. Like, when you make that call out and talk about those things, like, what do you mean?
Well, I mean, I think one thing somebody said to me recently, oh, you don't have any kids? Like, why are you interested in supporting kids? Like, you know what I mean? Which I thought,
our future.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, it's kind of obvious.
Yeah.
But I guess that I was reflecting on it. It's like, well, I think I felt a lot of support as a kid, and also felt like the power of education as a kid. I don't know. I was like kind of like nerdy gay kid growing up in the 90s. And so like
rough.
Right.
Yeah.
And so school, and safe school environments and great teachers were like this source of important community sort of for me.
Yeah.
And
Safety. For
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah. And so I dream of wanting to make sure that that's accessible for everyone.
Yeah.
And I think also about, I had an experience the past few years. I have these dear friends who had been wanting to have a kid and finalized an adoption of a newborn. And they're small business owners here in Columbus and creative and sort of amazing. And they have this great community, this queer community too. And when they adopted this baby, they were like, oh, we're all going to help take care of it. Like, this is kind of like, we want you to be part of this baby's life. And wanted to keep hanging out. I think I've had a lot of friends who've had a baby and then they kind of disappear. But this was like, I've been watching this little kid grow up. Yeah. And I think these
Village.
Exactly. And this is our community. And these are the people we want in our community. I want to make life great for them.
Yeah.
And so for us to continue to grow as a city, we need to invest in the future and invest in the kids through things like universal pre-K, childcare. I know we as a city have done a good job with pre-K to some extent. We have this program called Early Start that's serving about 1,300 kids a year.
Right.
And it shows great results.
Yeah.
And it gets kids into Columbus City school buildings where they get great teachers who are Columbus City school teachers. And I think we need to find ways to expand upon that. And it's expensive.
My daughter did pre-K.
Oh, great.
At CCS.
Yeah. How was it?
It was great.
Yeah.
I mean, she had loving teachers who are still in her life today. Her kindergarten teacher is still in her life today. And it's just when we can make investments in those places and in the early lives of children, it's super important to their development. And, we've got, Commissioner Crawley that's really invested in doing that work. And other folks, who are on council who are invested in doing that work. But I was really excited to see that as a part of your platform.
Yeah. And I do want to share, I think partly the thing of saying, yes, let's do this. Let's get to, universal pre-K for all, right?
People say, we're
It's
never
like,
going to
we're
get there.
there. Or somebody's already working on that
Yeah.
or something. But it's like, I think part of this is a vision of what we can see in our city council, which is one that looks at the problem and the scale of the problem and sets big goals for how to solve it. I mean, I think that that's what we deserve in the city of Columbus.
Yeah.
And
big ideas.
We're not always going to get all the way there right away, right? We're not. But I think we can't be afraid of setting those big goals out there. And part of the reason for that is it brings a lot of people along. They want to invest in something like that.
Because Columbus can be one of those places where it's like, well, we've always done it like this, and we keeping it like this. It's like, that doesn't always. And again, like, I have seen folks, trying to do things and doing things on council that are different. But some of that stuff is also met with like some pushback of like, well, why are you trying to change that? Yeah. And so I do think that this is a different city than it was 20 years ago and 30 years ago. Like it requires, new conditions require something different. And I'm excited to hear that you're open to, being a visionary and really trying to implement some things that, folks might say, when people hear universal, they're like, it's just not going to work.
But I gotta tell you, it's like, when I go knock on somebody's door in Columbus,
they're like, socialism. Sorry.
No, people are like, that sounds right. Yeah. They're like, we need to figure out how to pay for childcare. And we're struggling doing it. And
the things that people think that they're against, they're actually not against. Like, people will say, I'm against like everyone, having universal child care or health care. But when you break down the tenets of what that actually means, they'll be like, oh yeah, I support that. Yeah. It's like, yeah.
Well, and I think it might be more often like, I don't know that regular people are actually against that. Like, I think the people in our communities are for these things.
Yeah.
And maybe it's just sort of a smaller group of people who are looking at the way things have always been done and saying, no, we can't get there.
For sure. Or we don't have the money to get there. Sure. Just, it sounds like you have a posture of like possibility of like what could be possible if we make these changes, or, we allocate this here versus it being, people talk about the police budget a lot. Like, what would happen if we allocated some of that large police budget to doing other things in the community? Which leads me to another question for you. Like, what are your thoughts on, police accountability in Columbus? And there's a ballot initiative, right? That's supposed to be on the ballot this year around non-police response.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that work?
Yeah. Well, when I think about policing, one thing is I think about the Black Lives Matter protests in 2020 and how many of my friends and myself were out protesting and what we experienced then. It's clear to me from that work and from showing up at, events to commemorate the memories of folks who have experienced police violence, that we have so much more we have to do in the city to address that harm. And, like I said, I'm trying to learn every day about ways we can do that and how to work within the system we have to fix that and address that. I think that the idea, the ballot program around non-police response to mental health crises that the Columbus Safety Collective and others have been doing, I think that seems like important work. It is important work. I'm a little frustrated that it's gotten to this point where after years and years of conversation about that,
a civilian review board and all the things. Yeah.
And sort of spoken support from members of council that now that they feel like they haven't seen results, They
Yeah, they
have
have
to
to
expend the
go.
effort and money to go to the ballot.
Yeah,
I wonder how we could get things like that, which sound common sense to me, done
just
simpler,
funded.
right?
Right,
I think
instead of
that's an
having
example
to.
of a challenge.
Mhm.
But, I respect the advocacy to try to get done what's needed.
Yeah.
Right.
But I think that's a great point. It's like advocacy takes energy.
Mm.
I know the people who have been trying to do that for years.
Yeah.
Um, who have built Columbus Safety Collective,
Yeah.
and even the folks who aren't part of Columbus Safety Collective, who are organizers in the community, who've been organizing around this work for a long time. And I think that that's a great point. Is that like, why not just allocate the budget to support this work, versus people having to do that? It's backbreaking work to get something on the ballot,
Yeah.
and then you have to get people to support it.
Yeah.
So I think that's a great point.
Yeah. I mean, I don't fully know the answer to that.
Mm-hmm.
Why that's the place they felt they had to go to.
Yeah.
But I think it reflects something I'd like to see different, which is I'd like to figure out how to support organizers and advocates in coming to the table around these kinds of solutions, in more collaboration, maybe.
Yeah. So I've got a question about your current work. So you're here as a representative of yourself and not your job.
Yes.
But you work with the immigrant population in Columbus as an attorney. We know sort of what folks are facing in terms at the federal level. Can you talk about how you would implement what you're learning in that work as a member of city council? Or what learnings you would take from that work and, infuse it in the work that you're doing at city council?
Yeah. Well, the work that I do now, sitting across the table from individuals and families who have immigrated here from other countries, who are often, all kinds of people, right? People who are immigrants are all kinds of people, but who I think, are bringing such life to our city, makes me want to be as strong an advocate as possible for immigrants here who make up the fabric of our community.
Yeah.
I think that obviously it's a scary time in so many ways around this issue. And it's unpredictable a little bit what's coming out of the White House. And so, I think we have to be really smart and strategic about how to support our neighbors who are immigrants in this city. I think about welcome, like what does it mean to be welcoming in a real deep way? And what does safety look like? And, I think that means paying attention to the ways in which the bias of being, not an immigrant shapes how our social services, how our city looks and works. So we have to pay attention to the data we keep on our residents and how we share that data and whether it's secure, to protect our residents who are here from challenges and enforcement.
Yeah.
I also think about like languages that people speak in Columbus. And I think we can do more as a city to support the idea that when you walk into a City of Columbus office or entity, or you're looking at a website, or you're speaking to someone on 311, you can access this service regardless of what language you speak and what your national origin is.
Making it more accessible.
Yeah. I know some cities have created like an office of language access that makes sure we're integrating that everywhere. And I think that's something we could look at in Columbus, given the huge number of languages folks are speaking. And then also I think we can invest more in supporting legal help for people. I know that there's a large number of unaccompanied minors coming into the United States. And I think, could go back to our story about kids in the future, in particular about, okay, these folks are here, they need help. There's some legal actions that can be taken to help get them visas and protection. I think there's more we can do to invest in that through services the city can offer.
Yeah. I think having a diverse skill set and coming on to council is important. So I appreciate you, talking a little bit about that.
My grandpa was an immigrant.
Okay.
From Austria, from Vienna.
Yeah. Okay.
And sort of fled with his parents because he was Jewish as the Nazis came in. And so like I've been thinking about him a lot this year, with everything going on, and like, the struggles people have to go through to make it here, and the privilege that has given me. And we're in kind of this, migration. We're all coming from someplace.
Yeah.
Right.
Your grandpa, did he, lose a lot of friends? Did you lose family during that time?
Yeah, he lost family. His parents came with him.
Yeah.
So they were lucky in that way.
Yeah.
But there were others that didn't make it.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
How do you think that shaped you as a person? Like, does your grandpa talk to you about that? Is he quiet about it, or?
My grandpa passed away in I think 2012. But he's made a big impact on me. I mean, he was a creative guy and creative thinker, right? I mean, I think coming from a different place and also having dealt with that kind of threat of authoritarianism, made him think, man, we just have to say what we think, move forward on the right thing, and respond and be flexible too, I think, in the sense of like, he came from a totally different world and culture. And then he built a life in New York City that that no one would have expected. Yeah. And that's because I think he brought a curiosity. And I think I look up to that in my work and approach to things.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, bless him.
Yeah. Thanks.
And I want to ask you, how is being Jewish? How has that shaped you, and like your outlook on life, and how you'll show up in this work, if at all?
Well, I think it's being Jewish has given me a certain kind of cultural history, maybe, and community. But I think there's a lot of cultural piece to it, in the story of my grandparents and my dad, and has taught me about the importance of finding community, and finding space for community. There's a lot of rituals around Shabbat and sort of taking some time at the end of the week, and sort of having dinner with people and unplugging. And I kind of came to that, became more interested in that in my 20s than in childhood. And so, but it's helpful, as we enter this kind of hard work of campaigning and of trying to fight for things you think are right, to remember to invest in having a good meal with some good people.
Yeah. And
at the end of the week.
Like tradition and like what it means to carry on that tradition, or any tradition, really. Because I always like thread that through my work. Like even being somebody who's not from Columbus, I'm always concerned with the people that came before me, and making sure that I'm not like disrespecting the legacies of people that had to work really hard to get us where we are already, and like trying to understand, as a person who wasn't born here, like, what does this all mean, and why is this specific like high school important to people, or why is this specific church important to people, or why is this person
Yep.
You know, I may not like this person at all, but they're really important to a big group of people.
Yep.
And like, why is that? And understanding that instead of like, you know, imparting my views on every single thing when I don't necessarily like know the landscape. So that's why I feel like it's okay to like want to change things. And I feel like that's been a thread through our conversation. It's like sometimes things do need to be different, but also like how do we keep you know, traditions
and relationships.
Like relationships
right?
are super important.
Acknowledging that, we actually, right, one thing about, they always like, there's like a joke about Jews and all the different opinions and, you know, I don't know. And I think that gives me some sense of like, yeah, we can stay in community and show up together and disagree about some things and work through it and come back to the relationship.
Yeah.
You know,
I don't believe in being all the civility all the time.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think you just need to like say the hard. You can say the hard thing with like tact. Sometimes you can't.
Yeah. And you have to like acknowledge it and try to find ways to come back together, you know?
Yeah.
But
for sure. Yeah. For sure. So I want to ask you another question about the spot on, you know, this is a show run by a Black woman. The seat that you'd be occupying if elected was, you know, formerly a Black woman. And I've seen, I stay online, like reading little things that people say and comments that folks make. And, you know, people have mentioned, you know, we want to see, you know, a Black woman in the seat, or, you know, people have mentioned, you know, Shannon Hardin shouldn't have said that he wanted a Black woman to take that seat. And then there's a part of me as a Black woman that says like, I like and appreciate seeing representation on council that I feel like reflects me. And I've also gotten past like, I've seen elected officials who look like me who don't necessarily represent my interests. And so I'm like past that piece. But I want to ask you, like, as a person who you would, if you were elected, you'd be taking that seat. Like, you know, why should I trust that you'll be looking out for given our history in this country, that you'll be looking out for everybody?
Yeah. I mean, I think that, look, I respect and believe in the importance of representation and public office and media and culture. And so I take that seriously, that conversation about the need for this to be a seat to continue in the line, to have a Black woman represented there. But I guess I think that, you know, I think a lot of people do think that, kind of like what you said, like that what's most important is that we have the work getting done that needs to get done for our communities. And, you know, District 7 is a diverse community and includes all kinds of people. And, you know, I'd be an advocate for all of them. I think that I'm concerned about the success of Black women in our city and people of color in our city. And I know that the best way to be an advocate for them is to try to deliver things that they need in their lives. And so things like reducing the cost of childcare, you know, I have represented folks in eviction. I know that eviction is an issue that Black women disproportionately are facing. And I have Black women who are lawyers and doctors and advocates. And when we sit around and they're honest with me, they hurt for that fact that, you know, Black women as a whole, we want to help support them in doing better in our city.
Yeah.
Having longer, more healthier, more successful lives.
Yeah.
And so, you know, the eviction defense is like one piece. I saw folks coming in with their kids. I think about what can I do for those Black women and their kids, right?
Yeah.
We can try to find a way to get their kids to be successful and educated and support the cost of childcare and all that. But I think there's so much work to do. And, I feel humble in trying to go out for this. I know that I might not be the face that somebody expects in this seat or maybe wants in this seat, but I'm hopeful that the work we're going to do is going to demonstrate that I can be a strong advocate for folks who might not expect it.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for that. And I appreciate your comment around, I think as somebody who does have a level of like privilege and resource, I do always worry about my sisters who don't have what I have and who don't have the access that I have, and like making sure that they're okay above even myself, because like I can likely get it done, but that's not always the case. Sometimes folks' resources are so non-existent and there's so much suffering out here that, I appreciate, you acknowledging that the folks that you might be talking to who are lawyers and doctors and have these great jobs and these great lives are also having a conversation about concern about the folks who are not necessarily in those positions, who are living in this city.
And that's a place where it's like in this moment, I mean, I heard somebody at a forum talk about, raise his hand and say, okay, we're talking about DEI and people are concerned about the pushback against DEI, but maybe DEI hasn't gotten us everything we need because we're seeing still Black folks locked up in jail at a disproportionate rate. I mean, I think this is a time for conversations, right? About, how do we support DEI and the idea of diversity, which, I was standing up with students the other day at Ohio State against SB1. I think we also have to, in this moment, dial into what's the material reality in the lives of Black and brown people in Columbus. And how can we continue to turn the needle on that?
I think
what are some real solutions towards that meet the scope of the challenge, right?
And the challenge is large when you think about
absolutely
that. I think that those initiatives at the federal level were like an excellent step in the right direction, and yet and still people were falling through the cracks. So we're losing something and it's awful, and I wish that it weren't that way. And then also, how do we examine the cracks that were there and like how we can perhaps fix those? So that's a complex conversation. And I appreciate like engaging, in the conversation around that. So I want to ask you, like, as a last question, what do you want people to know about you? About why you're running, whatever you want people to know about you. Here's your chance.
Well, I want to say I'm really excited about what we're doing here. And, we're building a campaign to engage people seriously and deeply all across the city, in every neighborhood, every week between now and Election Day and beyond. We're just getting started. This past weekend, we knocked these 1,200 doors on the south side, on the north side, different neighborhoods, and heard a lot from people at the doors about how they are concerned about what's going on at the national level and how they want our city to work better for them. They're concerned about the trash in front of their house and in their neighborhood.
I actually didn't get a chance to, I told you this was the last question, but I actually didn't get to ask you about that. Like, I seen like articles about like people getting bitten by dogs. I think with the last forum, somebody was just like, I just want my street lights to work. Like you just mentioned the trash, like
trash is big for people.
It's big in my house. It's a big, it's a big thing at my house. Because if nobody picks up your trash or if somebody like walks off with your trash bin or whatever, like it really like messes up, especially if you just have like, we host a lot and like, so we'll have people over. It's like, this is now really inconvenient. It's a small inconvenience, but like those show up in folks' everyday lives. And will you be an advocate for what seems like, a dog bite is not a small inconvenience, but like those things that like people always say that they're going to fix, and then something bigger comes along, and then the smaller things never get addressed.
I know. I think we need to be, I think I need to be an advocate on that. I mean, I was driving from the South Side yesterday, and I was just like, my friend, we had done this knocking together, talking to people. And I was like, wow, we do have to do something about all this trash. People are talking about it and it matters. And it's a sign of what people look for in their government. And if we can't get that right, they're not going to turn out and vote, and they're
material
not going to
conditions,
right?
Like you just said.
Yeah, they're not going to turn out and vote.
Don't even pick up my trash. I'm not coming out.
And then we're never going to get out of this mess with Trump and all that, right? Like I think what's interesting and exciting to me about this work that we're building together with volunteers across the city is we're having these conversations about what do you see, what do I see, and what can we do about it, and we're thinking about how do we dial in and really support and address the needs that people see outside their door?
Yeah.
On the small level and on the big level.
Awesome.
And if we can keep doing that together, that's what I'm hopeful about. We don't have to think about the mess in Washington. Let's try to fix the trash, right?
Yeah. Let's what is it that our parents are? I don't know if your parents always told you this, but focus on the things that you can control.
That's right.
When things get really hard, sometimes you just gotta dial into the things that you can, which is why this show is important. And like what you're doing is important, because it's like we absolutely can do things to impact what's happening at the federal level, but like understand that what affects your everyday life are these local races that, and the local politicians that we need to be focused on, and things at the state level that, there's just so much going on that things get missed as a regular citizen wanting to engage.
Yes.
So yes, I definitely agree with you on that. And just to say again, like, is there anything else you want, to add? Make sure that people hear about you before we close out.
Well, no, just get out and vote May 6th.
Okay.
And look us up, jessevogelforcouncil.com, and we're on Instagram and Facebook. And honestly,
no TikTok.
Not at the moment.
Yeah,
not at the moment.
I feel like we're close in age, and I just like really started engaging on TikTok, and I'm like, I might have to kick Instagram to the curb, because I really I learn a lot.
I need to
TikTok.
get on there more.
You need to get on there. The search function, amazing.
Cool.
Like anything you want to find. Stuff going on at your house. A good shampoo.
I predict
TikTok.
that by the end this is over, there will be a TikTok.
Yes.
There isn't quite yet.
You perhaps may not have time to use TikTok. For, whatever allotted amount of time, because you're busy, but, in your downtime, check it out.
But come out. People, I hope people come join us. And if they're interested or curious, there's a choice to make on the ballot this year, right? And that's exciting. And think about it and get involved. And I'm happy to talk to anyone about this work because I'm excited about it.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Jesse. You have a very sunny disposition, and I've enjoyed, talking to you, and I wish you all the best on the campaign.
Thank you, Taria. Great to talk to you too.
Sure.